friend out of this picture? Can you face tune out the bungalow behind me? Can you vanish the ugly...
Greetings and welcome to the Solution Podcast, show that seeks to present constructive solutions to our everyday problems. On October 28, one of the most powerful hurricanes in history ravaged western Jamaica, leaving more than 500,000 people without power, water, and telecommunications, along with a trail of death and destruction. In its immediate aftermath, Jamaicans at home and abroad and the international community responded to the crisis in unison. Tons of hurricane relief aid poured into our island, whether cash or kind, or their invaluable time and expertise to start the rebuilding process. Obviously, the Government of Jamaica is the lead agent driving the recovery process, with Prime Minister Dr. Holness vowing that the country will rebuild stronger and more resilient from the devastation. In this, our debut podcast, we will discuss the issues around the recovery process. Joining me in studio is Mr. Randy Finnikin, a wearer of many important hats. But for this show, we choose to recognize him as a social engineer and community activist. He's a resident of Old Harbour and have been heavily involved volunteering his service in the development of Jamaica's fastest growing town. Mr. Finnikin, welcome.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hanson.
You will have the enviable record of being our first guest in our debut podcast. What a pleasure to have you.
Oh, it's my privilege to be here. And just honored to participate in this. I believe Old Harbour News has been impacting and reaching. And hopefully this podcast will allow you to reach even further. So I'm very thrilled to be here. Thank you for having me.
We certainly appreciate you taking the opportunity to accept the invitation as well. So let's start off with the hurricane recovery effort.
Yes.
What has been, there has been, so many discussions around the whole management and all that. But as we know, it is a crisis.
It is.
And you just have to start from somewhere. There is no foolproof method. There is no one way that is right.
Correct.
But being a social engineer and a community activist for all your life, I know that you have assembled a team of civic groups, and you all have combined your efforts, and you have been in Western Jamaica, specifically I think St. Elizabeth, where you have been on the ground in the communities doing a lot of work.
Yes.
Just tell me about the kind of work you have been doing and from what you have observed firsthand on the ground happening in that part of Western Jamaica.
Wonderful. The effort is a huge one, and as you said in your opening, led by the government, and I too want to say the government has thus far done a very good job, as been recognized by international bodies, the UN, the IDB, and locally we can see that Melissa, we didn't have a blueprint to follow, but as the weeks following the hurricane, as we've been able to get into communities. I've been predominantly working in the St. Elizabeth, St. James communities, and I really am impressed with, first and foremost, the indomitable Jamaican spirit. Melissa crushed those communities, but the spirit of the people weren't crushed at all. Persons lost everything, but they had that sense of hope, and they rallied to help themselves as much as they could, whilst receiving help from others. And the response from the world to the crisis, the humanitarian response, the selfless giving from a wide cross section of persons. Our little bit, is features in that too, but the important part of it is to see how people are rallying. The average Jamaican is rallying to support. So yes, going into districts, working with farmers groups and so on has been a part of our MO. But I'm just impressed with the spirit of the Jamaican people, and the fact that the flames of hope still burn. And there really is that strong sense that we will build back with the help, with God's help, and the help of the many persons around.
So, like I said, I think last week or week before last, I think you were down in
Yes.
I think Monroe.
We're in Monroe the last
You were in Monroe. You said you were in Middle Quarters, I think.
Middle Quarters and in Black River.
And Black River area as well.
Yes.
And so we're in St. James again. You were
Yes. My sojourn in St. James were a part of the church. The church started some 2,500 gift food and care packages from Trelawney into the border of Hanover and St. James, looking at Unity Hall, and those areas that were, tough. Some rural communities also that, believe me, it was scary for me en route to those places. But when we got to the central location, persons were there, and they were there, some for hours, waiting on the drop, waiting on the supplies. So it really has been in some deep rural places in St. James. And as I said before, the Middle Quarters, one was very special to us here in Old Harbour, because that one came as a result of representatives of the Middle Quarters CDC.
And of course, you're part of a CDC.
And because I'm a part of the Old Harbour CDC, it touched my heart. And therefore, I responded, and we at the Old Harbour CDC discussed how we could partner with the Middle Quarter CDC to help with their roofing, and to look at twinning of the CDCs going forward, given that the build back is going to take some time into the future.
What are some of the work you have been able to do so far
Great.
in those communities?
Awesome. Well, initially, we recognized, and certainly based on the work that I've done predominantly in community development, I recognized that the build back was going to be long and hard. So I waited for about 3 weeks, 4 weeks after the hurricane to look at lives and livelihoods. I was concerned that after the storm, we need to help people get back on their feet in terms of income generation, in terms of production, and predominantly we're looking at agriculture. So our first sojourn in Black River was to help people to put their roofs back on. So in collaboration with the Old Harbour Bay communities,
CDC?
disaster response
Oh,
group in
okay.
Old Harbour Bay.
Okay.
We were able, and the ministers fraternal, we put together a large contingent of persons who went into Black River proper and into the residential communities where persons were picking up the scraps. And we basically went into homes, pick up scraps, wash mud out of homes, and restore roofs. So we were able to, in that one day, reinstall 4 coverings. Some were able to put zinc sheets back on, others were able to properly install tarps, and so forth. So we've been focusing on those physical activities that will help people to return to some sense of normalcy. What we found was that because of the extent of the impact and the loss on persons, they were overwhelmed. They were helping themselves, but the mammoth-ness of the task, they were overwhelmed. So when we moved into town, one group classified us as the cavalry. Cavalry is here. Because we went with gloves in hand, boots on, and we would just not stop, rain or darkness. We kept at it until the last unit that we were on was restored for the families to utilize it. So that was, and we did the same in middle quarters, working with persons whose livelihoods. One of the members in middle quarters, very active community leader, and in fact a teacher also, had roof damage. She had a greenhouse, a nursery, plant nursery that was wiped out. The debris in her yard was bad. We helped clean it up. There was another house that, this one was difficult. I mean, 2 light poles had fallen on this one unit and a fruit tree and the one house. So we, they had gone again, as I said before, helped themselves, but had reached a point where they needed additional help. And given the wide cross-section of persons and our groups, and our team, we were able to help them. And even while doing that, the rain was coming, pouring, and we helped them to get roof back on their heads and to move back into their spaces.
As far as I understand, talking to you, a couple of days ago,
Yes.
in some instances, you guys didn't even liaise with anyone on the ground. You just drove down and wherever you see where you think there's a need, you just stop there and start and get. I mean, how did that concept come about? Normally persons would just let me try and liaise with somebody, given also some of the horror stories about crime and all of that.
Yes.
You guys just decided to just walk by faith and just go down there.
The thing too is that there was a contact in the community, but when we got there, we couldn't find him.
Yeah?
We couldn't find him. It was now 1 p.m. and we were driving around in a JUTC bus, feeling like tourists because we were just looking and seeing the destruction, and we couldn't find our guy. But almost on every roof there was a man, a single person on top of his house.
Doing something.
And we figured that one man can't be put on a roof. We just stopped the bus and we just went out, introduced ourselves and said, how can we help you? And that opened up opportunities and possibilities, tears and relationships forged, and we just went to work to help families rebuild.
Right.
But it was that particular incident was so touching because the lady of the house, her husband was on the top of the roof, and she said to us, he has been on it for 1 week alone. And she has been clearing debris, and this morning she said she gave up. When she saw the bus, she called her family and said, look at the tourists driving by. When we stopped and went down to her house, she says, God sent you. Because they were at their wits' end. They just felt that they couldn't go any further.
A lot of persons in those areas, they benefit somewhat from, care packages
Yes.
by Jamaicans, and the
Yes.
government will be sending in
Yes.
care packages. But I mean, it's a small amount
Yes.
for each family.
Yes.
Any particular unique story you have heard in terms of how they have been able to survive? I mean, how do you find food when you might get a care package today, but
Yes.
then the next
Yes.
time you get a
Yes.
care package could be in a week's time?
Yes.
How they have been
Yes.
able to survive in those sort of situations?
Yeah, you know, again, the Jamaican spirit, that indomitable Jamaican spirit. And, you know, and there are help coming from various sources. So persons, I gather, have been able to tap into the various sources as they become available.
Oh.
But they're also turning them hand make fashion. You know, they are the last mission I was on in St. James.
Right.
The gift package included, and this was sponsored largely by churches, but there were persons in the Canada and the US that had also sent funds to purchase these stuff. But there was this package of dehydrated a meal in there, and just at the point of distribution, someone would stand up and explain that in this package there is going to be this unique, complete, nutritious meal. This is how you are to prepare it. So, I've in just speaking with the people, listening to them, it has really been a challenge to keep their families nurtured, cared for, but again, tapping into the resources as they become available. But you can imagine, it's difficult because you can't predict it. You don't know for sure when supplies are going to come again.
Right.
So it is stretching what you have and hoping for the best.
In your view, how long you think we will be able to fully recover as a people?
Wow. Sir Hansel, that's a tough question, because from the pictures, the videos, and from what we've seen on the ground, you know, the World Bank's analysis itself speaks to the economy, but not necessarily the nitty-gritty. There are some places where roads are no more. You know, communities are, you know, like literally no more. So in my mind, it is going to be a long haul project, a long haul build back. Obviously, communities where a roof has been displaced, you will see more people, some of those coming back on stream faster. But when you look at the overall picture, it's going to take years. It's going to take years to build back the economy, also the sense of community. There has been major disruption, and it's going to take time, because there is also the component, the psychological component that ought to be dealt with too, the trauma associated with that. And you know, as a people, we respond to trauma differently. We internalize most of the time,
Right.
and then that comes out sooner or later. Well, more so later than sooner, right? So those impacts too are not fully, you know, determined how that's going to be. But for the time being, the physical, we're looking at the physical, we're looking at the economic, and we're looking at the environmental. I mean, the truth be told, the ecosystem is so resilient so far that you travel to the west now, the greenery, it's just amazing to see how the natural flora has rebounded. Browns are now greens, and I mean, can you believe it? The bees were struggling to find food recently, but there are a couple of fruit trees that are coming back into bloom, right? Which is suggesting that the whole ecosystem is in restoration mode.
Yeah.
Right? The physical environment and the human habitat is going to require some major policy shifts. Technocrats will have to do their work. The social scientists will also have to go in to re-engineer some communities and move some dwellings. It's going to take some time.
Yeah.
But
And every community is unique and in their own way too as well.
There you go. And not just unique, but many are informal.
Yeah.
How do you get the word to the informal community? That, hey, listen, it's time for you to come, gather, listen. Here is a strategy. You know, so you
can't live there so anymore.
No,
you have to now come
there
over this side.
and move from there to where. Those are
and they're accustomed to perhaps just maybe the free water.
Yes.
Maybe they depend on the spring.
Yes.
They're not accustomed to paying water bill.
Yes.
I mean, how do you now move them into that farmer setting where now they would know there's a requirement to pay water bill?
Yes.
How do you now get that individual to really now understand that this is the new way? But how do you empower him so he's able to honor that requirement as well?
Right. And it's going to be, there's in instances where families and our communities have to move, it's going to be more than a house that needs to be made available.
Yeah, true.
You will have to teach people how to live in community. You'll have to help people to understand their new responsibilities. That's going to take some time. I mean, there will be, obviously there are, you know, local NGOs and CBOs, CSOs, the private sector, church, and so on. We have some capacity, but this at this you know, the scale is new.
Yeah.
It's new. This is not just one community, one district we're talking about. We're talking about thousands of people scattered across Cornwall County.
Right.
I mean, it's almost mountainous. There's some of the places you look at. It's just, it's a wonder. While we travel to one district in St. James, we had to ditch the bus and the truck and went in with pickup trucks to deliver the packages to those folks. And we're in there, and at one point I remarked, this must be a one-way in, and there's another way to get out, because the roads were just so narrow going up the mountain. But when we got on top of the mountain,
there's a whole community there.
Whole community was there. Whole community was there waiting.
So how do you know, how do you know restore that community one? But if the technocrats decide that, you'll have to now move that entire community, how do you now get the entire community on board to buy into that vision and say it is for our best interest?
Yes. Hence a lot of vision sharing, a lot of talking, a lot of community meetings, because the social engineering that is required to be able to, for families, for communities to be resilient in this climate active dispensation, is going to require a total change of mindset. And this is not just from the bottom. It's from government too, because a lot of what, in terms of permissible, what has been allowed to happen over the years has to stop. And obviously it can't be through draconian measures.
But what specifically would be some of those things that you think we just have to stop?
Yes. The building and living and riverbanks. It is clear that our weather systems have become more intense. When you look at what happened in St. James, it's as if the river, took back its course.
Yeah.
Now, if you were living on a riverbank, that should send a signal to you that you're in dangerous territory. So clearly, you know, Jamaica is an island. I guess most of us are living on a riverbank or somewhere for sure.
Or close to
But
it.
close to it for sure. But the truth is, where the mapping, the vulnerability, those mappings are done, it's clear that we will have to move people inland. Um, not just on riverbanks, but some of us have lived on a beach all our lives, you know.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
get out of our back door and we're in the sea. Well, the sea levels are increasing.
Right.
So we will have to do that. We see what has happened to Helsha.
Right. And
we
Harbour
see-
View. I remember
and
Harbour
Harbour
View,
View,
yeah.
and parts of Westmoreland. So clearly, the time has come for the authorities to be more stringent, be more firm in the monitoring and enforcing those no-build zones. At the same time, building resilience and in terms of how what response can be done to replanting mangroves and those, you know, sea wave breakers and those sort of stuff. So it's going to be a multi-pronged, multifaceted approach to getting the community and the society to reset, to rethink. Because what happens now is we all have to get into life continuity mode because we're islanders.
But I see a challenge with that, you know. Here's the challenge I'm seeing.
Yeah.
Given the culture, decades-old culture from independence till now,
Yes.
the votes
Yes.
and the informal community
Yes.
set up. We know there's a serious interconnectedness as it relates to that.
Yes.
I don't see how our leaders are going to fix that issue anytime soon, right? Because I mean, in 5 years' time, we have general elections, yes, but it could be a possibility where if you try to remove, relocate
Yes.
an entire informal community,
Yes.
that now could translate into the votes going against you.
Yes. Yes.
And we know the culture of politicians, not just here in Jamaica, but globally. It's the vote that counts, and,
Yes.
and anything that ensures leadership is required.
Courageous leadership
Yes, is
comes into
required.
play. It's not what you want people to do for you will matter these days. It's what collectively will be in the best interest of a community and certainly the Jamaican society.
Right.
So the more courageous leader, the real leaders, will step up and take self off the platform and recognize that we're talking about rebuilding stronger,
Yeah.
rebuilding a more resilient,
Yes.
ecosystem. But you don't say you have a resilient ecosystem by leaving the people in vulnerable places in the hope that they won't be affected.
Right.
No, it doesn't work like that. So it will require strong leadership at every level. Central government, local government, and most importantly, strengthened civil society. CSOs have a bigger role to play in organizing and keeping communities structured.
Just take, Captain, you mentioned CSO.
Yes.
Just explain to those who might not know when
Yes.
you say CSO, what that means.
CSO, civil society organization.
Okay.
The Neighborhood Watch, the Farmers Group, the Citizens Association, the Police Youth Club, all of these groups that are actively serving the community at the ground level. These organizations have a big role to play in maintaining the health of the community. Clearly, there will be added roles and responsibilities that they now need to play going forward in this join-up approach to building a stronger Jamaica. The truth is, we have been accustomed to stretching our resources, stretching our dollar, and many of us in informal communities have stretched our dollar to build, to put a roof over our heads. But those structures can't stand the puff of a wind, you know. So in a dispensation, when stronger winds, more ferocious winds and waves and rain is going to be normal,
Right.
you have to get the players, the stakeholders, the buy-in from all stakeholders to build that resilience in the communities.
I am foreseeing a challenge though,
Yes.
because the majority of these persons in Western Jamaica, they have been living on family land for decades,
Yes.
over a century in many
Yes.
cases. It's just they just live freely like that on the
Yes.
land, and I just can't see many of them, you know, moving towards a mindset to ensure that you build a more resilient structure
Right.
to call home.
Right.
I just listening to what is happening in the media and reading and even being there myself, because I've gone down there, I think,
Right.
on 4 occasions.
Right.
Many persons they're just, the intention is just to get two by two,
Existing, yes.
two 4x4 lot,
Yes.
2 posts,
Yes.
get some plyboard and
Yes.
some concrete board and put
Yes.
that up and call it home again.
Yes. Well, because of the absence of oversight, structure, policies are there against those things.
Yeah, because you have the building code.
The building code is there.
Yeah, and the parish council supposed to be ensuring
Absolutely,
that.
the parish council has councillors in every nook and cranny in Jamaica. Yet those breaches
Continue.
continue.
Well, it has been normalized, like you can just naturally just go
has
and
been
build anything
normalized.
as you feel.
Well, that's for the era past. That's for a dispensation past. In this era, where climate impacts are as they are and will be increasing as predicted, the a case in point, in Hanover,
Yeah.
I learned, and this is a case where my family member was involved, where they're living at their home that they have gotten approval from the municipal authority to build and to expand their home, and they have been there for nearly 20 years, and it has just started flooding. For the first time prior to the storm, the hurricane, it flooded. What led to that? Well, the same municipal authority gave approval for another commercial building, and that commercial facility started to dump the mangrove, dump the wetlands. The water from the hills didn't have anywhere to go. It flooded out the houses.
Yeah.
Now, the local authorities have a role to play, and they cannot, we cannot move forward as a nation without all these technocrats, getting off their laurels and provide the engagement and the supervision as is required. And I say engagement because, we have the saying that we're gone by the morning, can't look at the evening.
Right.
But it's going to require engagement. It's going to require conversation with some of those persons who, though vulnerable, they perhaps didn't suffer a flood event, but they're vulnerable because the next event could be their time.
Right.
So there are those affected directly and those who could be in the line of danger that would have to be engaged and participate in the process of restructuring and streamlining where we live and how we build, right? And yes, we have had to stretch our dollar, but we cannot compromise building standards going forward. We cannot, we cannot compromise 2-foot centers when we're building a plywood house,
Yeah.
you know, and put in rather than 2 foot centers, we're at 4 foot now. That those structures just won't stand at the grassroots level or at any level at all in our communities.
But over the years, historically, every parish council across
Yes.
Jamaica will tell you that they do not have sufficient inspectors who will go around and ensure that all structures being erected abide by the building code,
Yes.
which we know the building code, it's very stringent.
Yes.
And if applied, then many houses will remain standing.
Yes.
Because we have seen some houses down in St. Elizabeth that,
Yep.
that stood up to
Absolutely.
the Oregon.
Absolutely.
Right? So it is clear that if it is done properly, then
Yes.
this is the result. You will be
Yes.
able to withstand the
Yes.
storm. But I see a clash of, the politicians just being politicians. What guarantees them to remain in power? They are most likely inclined to do so. And the fact that it is a crisis, people want a roof over their head. They're just going to quickly go up and build a house and put up a structure.
Yeah.
And that would be the natural modus operandi of many people at the community level. They just want to put back a structure up, similar to what they had previously, even though they know that it's not resilient enough to withstand any kind of storm.
Yeah.
And therefore now, how do we now as a society, make those tough decisions? I'm just seeing a clash ahead, and I just believe that going forward, we are going to see many more of these weak structures going up. In another year or two, we are going to see many of these structures going up, and I guess, our leaders will just say, well, they need a house, don't it?
Well, the thing is, and yes, there are likely to be some clashes, but because we're looking long term, it therefore means that in the immediate and in the short term, these structures will have to move to more resilient structures. For instance, the government is ordering containerized units. The master builders are proposing concrete structures, and I've seen it was a container type. I saw a different type of structure and a flatbed heading into Western Jamaica. So there are some urgent responses, because in some instances we are still in the relief mode.
Right.
And in the relief mode, it's not permanent structures you're going to have in that relief mode. But as you're planning for the restoration, restoring is not temporary. It is the relief that is temporary. Restoring is when the hard decisions will be made. And yes, possible clashes will be made. But the thing is, it's not so much the number of building inspectors now, but the government has resources in terms of the councillors. The councillors, every district has a councillor. The councillor is a servant of the municipal authority. The councillor can provide information, feedback to the building inspectors. And the building inspectors can get information from councillors to provide, and then there is a police. And then we may need to put in some environmental wardens where necessary.
Right.
But there is, when we start to look outside of the box and we start to harness the resources that are around us, we'll soon find that we have sufficient resources, human resources, that can get the word out in terms of the vision of building back Jamaica stronger, more resilient, and helping people to understand. Right? There are some who probably think that, okay, so Melissa, the last big one was 37 years ago or thereabout.
Right.
So, I have some time before the next one hits, so I can continue to do what I've been doing.
But it is quite possible that by next year,
Another one will hit.
we could be hit with another category. Anything beyond category 3
Yes.
will cause
Yes.
well, from category 3 upwards, will cause serious damage.
Yes.
Right? And I I can already foresee that our leaders are in a race against time
It is.
to try and get the buy-in that you speak to.
Yes.
Because if you don't get the buy-in, there's going to be a clash between the people and the leadership.
Yes. There is need for a national visioning of sorts that speak to the whole idea of being resilient. We can't lift the country up out of the Caribbean Sea and place it someplace else. We're gonna be here.
Right.
We're gonna be here
Here
for a while.
forever. Yeah.
Right? So therefore, how are we going to live here? Those conversations need to start and to lead the way in the restoration, in the restoration and the build back. It can't be that we take the approach as we have taken that led to where we are. It has to be a totally different approach. But I am convinced that we have the people, we have the talent, the experience to respond. Not only do we have it locally, but thank God, as a nation, we are loved. There are international best practices that can be adapted. There are countries that are pledging resources to help us to build resilience as we move forward. So whilst it will be challenging, there's no doubt, and we challenge it and challenging on many fronts.
Right.
I am confident that taking the right approach, once we take that participatory, collaborative approach, we will be able to build back something that's much more resilient than what we have currently.
The government has come in for a lot of flack in terms of how they have been managing the
Yes.
recovery process. But for me, that is expected.
Yes.
Because it's a crisis. You have to start
Yes.
from somewhere.
Yes.
But of course, we can criticize, and as the name of this podcast, The Solutions, we look to identify solutions
Yes.
constructively and put them forward.
Right.
What different so far do you think the government could have done to have greater impact?
That's a good question. That's a good question. It's like a moving target, because for any response, they require an assessment. You can't respond by taking something that you don't know what the needs are.
Yeah.
So and I know that the government mobilized its people from every agency, and they were doing needs assessment and so on. I think the cry has had to do with speed with which entry, assessment, and support was delivered to some people. But bearing in mind, one can't ever anticipate or expect to get a full mark in a situation like this, because when you're talking about the Jamaican terrain, when you're talking about that roads and bridges no longer exist to get over there, you've got to know that there is no more bridge, no more road first before you go. And yes, you're going to use helicopter and you're going to fly over, but it's going to take some planning to make contact. Remember also that telecommunication was down. So it was a multi-pronged problem. But speed, the urgency of both the assessment and the response would be something that the affected, the ones mostly affected, would and have cried out that no help has gotten to me yet, and so on. It has a lot to do with the lag between assessment and the solution and or the support. There were opportunities where government could have perhaps look at more communal living, for instance, in those communities that were most devastated, they could put in military type tents and could have had a community of 150, 200, 500, 1,000 people in a community where you have put in some, amenities.
Yeah. Similar to like what happened in many of those war-torn countries.
Absolutely.
You have the refugee
They call
camps.
them camps.
Camps, right?
Yes.
Where you have hundreds, in some cases thousands of people
Yes.
living in these camps.
Yes.
But all the medics are
Amenities
there.
are there. Yes.
Water,
Yes. Yes.
sanitary convenience,
Yes.
and security too as well.
Yes.
I think our government missed out on that approach.
Absolutely. It's
So
one,
for example, I was a bit taken aback when I think it was last week I saw in one of our major newspapers, I think, where Independence Park in Black River is now a dump site. And they said, okay, all debris will be coming here and they will now transport it now from there to somewhere else. I think that the size of Independence Park in Black River should have been a campsite,
right,
or a relief site, if you want
right,
to call it that, where you have this massive tent,
yeah,
massive tents where
tent city. Yes.
The cooks are over there.
Yes.
The doctors are over there. The nurses are over there. You have the area where you have the elderly and the children. You have some sponge, some mattresses you could get. You could easily incorporate some portable toilets. And of course, they are gender based. You have a few over there for the males, few over there for the females. You could have some shower areas.
Yes.
You get some tanks set up,
yes,
create some shower areas, male and female.
Yeah.
And therefore now everybody now within that space, if you want to get medical aid, if you want to get some food, you go to that site.
Yes.
And then you can collect food, eat, you can go back to where you're doing your cleaning up to where you live. And to me now you could replicate that now in other communities.
Yes.
And I think they miss out on that. And I think
it's a missed opportunity.
Is one of the areas I think they would have received a low mark for.
That is true.
Right?
Is true.
And I think that is something that they should have done.
Yes.
Don't know why it wasn't done.
Yes.
But to me, to use Independence Park as a dump site for debris, you could have put that
yes,
out on the outskirts further out.
That's true.
You know?
They were a little short-sighted in that regard because there are still some schools to this very day
that is being used as shelters. Exactly.
Right? You could set up a tent city. There are some schools with 120 people still there, 50 persons still there.
Yeah.
You could set up adequate shelter and support facilities that the schools could be reopened sooner, and the kids, rather than running around with their parents trying in the debris and all of that stuff, could actually make their way back to schools where schools had a roof on it, of course.
Right.
You know, but the thing is, looking at those options certainly would have helped in a large way, in being providing more equitable support also to the persons, but also giving the authorities an opportunity to scope the community and to look for the vulnerabilities,
Right.
and to do the necessary mapping,
Right.
and being able to communicate directly with families that, hey, listen, you are at risk. This is where your house was. We're not going to allow you to build back there at this point.
Right.
So for the time being, this is where you will be temporarily housed while
in this camp.
While we look at more permanent solutions for you.
Right. Or build a more resilient structure if the location is okay to rebuild there.
Right.
Then ensure that that house is more resilient.
Absolutely. Matters of land tenure is something that would have to be fast tracked for persons to be able to build better structures.
As I mentioned that, I see where the National Land Agency,
yes,
I think they were down in Petersfield,
right,
doing some work down there, right,
yes.
And that is also very, very crucial.
That's a positive step. That's decades overdue. for that kind of assistance that will strategically result in a transformed community, because there is a reason why Westmoreland has the most wooden structures. There's a reason.
Yeah.
The folks don't have tenure, you know, and then they have come up with a system.
Yeah.
That they need their houses and they need to move from this plot this time. They put it in a truck and drive it over to the next plot that is available. That's just how it is, you know. So you know, in those communities in Western Jamaica that I am familiar with, because that's where I'm from,
Right.
you know, you rent a spot and you put your house there. You put your house and it's movable. It's a mobile thing, right? The thing is, we've got to look at those systematic tenure, land ownership, land tenure situations to have them resolved.
And I think in many respects, even the issue with land and how you build on the land, I think it's time for Jamaicans who live on these family lots to now come together as a family and discuss how are we going to place the houses on the land. So, I mean, get it properly surveyed. And rather than just, okay, mama they tell me, or papa they tell me, that's a free land and we can build anywhere. And rather than having this family quarrel over the land and somebody build here, and next person come drop another house right exactly in front of them. And we have seen, especially in the inner city communities, when there's a fire to one house, then you find that you have 20 houses burned down because there is no structural layout of the land. And I think it's an opportunity now for those communities, for those families down in the western end, to know to do a proper assessment of the property.
So when I mention greater engagement of CSOs, CBOs, NGOs, all of these non-profits, philanthropic, grassroots entities, to include the JPs, every community in Jamaica now has access to a justice of the peace, who can mediate, who are trained in mediation, who are trained. Everybody listen to a JP, right? Therefore, the time for proactive engagement is now. You don't sit there waiting for a conflict to brew, a family quarrel or whatever. You know of these things that are prevailing. Well, you call a conference of the movers and the shakers in the family, in the community, including the police, including the local authority, the parish council, the councillor, and you have a conference of sorts around this potential problem. And you agree at what the possible solutions would be, and you move forward with that consensus. So it has to be a lot more consensus building, but it really has to be more proactive engagement. We cannot see a continuation of a guy.
The other approach.
Absolutely.
Somebody come and put a boat structure here. The next cousin or the sister or the brother come and they build something here. So and there is no proper layout. And I mean, it pains me sometimes going into some of these communities, because I always look at it and say, then in case there's an emergency, in case there's a fire, for example, how do they get out? How the firefighters get in? Right? I mean, the lanes are narrow because everybody want to occupy. I mean, what would it take for you to give up 5 feet of land space to ensure that 2 vehicles can drive past each other in that lane, for example?
That, however, requires community organizing, and it's not something we practice and are very proficient at in our country in terms of organizing our communities. Most of the times, communities are left to organize themselves, and we're talking about including NHT schemes and other well-built gated communities, and you name it. People move in, and soon thereafter they start doing what they want to do. So the time has come for the authorities to really be more into communicating and ensuring that people not just buy a house or build a house, but it is done towards, it's done to meet the standards that will ensure not just resilience to natural disasters, but as you said, more accessible to the police, more accessible to the fire truck, more accessible to even suppliers of goods and services.
Yes, and for them too. I mean, you can imagine you're going into your community, it's a family lot. In some of these community family lots, it's 10, 20 acres.
Yes.
But then to get onto the property, there is no structure.
Right.
And it's a narrow pathway to get to the houses. And I'm saying, then what would it take you to just go back a little bit more to create that? But before we go further, let me just use the opportunity to acknowledge the sponsors of this, our very first episode.
Yes.
Eden Renal Services Limited, Shop 18 Oasis Plaza in Spanish Town. Call them at 876-984-2427. You can get 40% discount for your dialysis services with the promo code OH2N4. That's 40% discount with the promo code OH294. And I also must acknowledge Prasad and Son Limited out of Guyana for all your authentic hardwood from Guyana. You can call them at 876. This is their local number, by the way. You can call them at 876-203-2602. That's 876-203-2602. And if you know about Guyana, they produce some of the best hardwood globally.
Yes.
Right? So reach out to Prasad and Son, and they will take care of the rest for you. So, Brother Finnikin, again, as a social engineer, we need to look at the mental health aspect of it.
Yes.
I mean, people are stressed.
Yes.
We see in one news bite where the gentleman said, since the hurricane, his partner has gone to quote unquote greener pastures. Funny to some, right? Because of very Jamaicans can be very dramatic and colorful.
Yes. Yes.
But it is a real issue. In other words, a man a losing woman. That can create mental issues.
Yes.
How do you suggest we navigate that and help our brothers and sisters who are struggling mentally, just like when you said even earlier, you said that the lady, after cleaning and seemed like she's not making any progress, she was about to give up before you and your team rode into town.
Yes.
How do we help?
The psychosocial, the therapeutic has also have to be mainstreamed in the response, in the national response. Where are people who internalize this? A lot of stuff, harm, pain, trauma, we internalize. Unfortunately, it was just 2 days ago or so, we saw a relative slaughtering 3 members of his family. We saw an officer, a police officer, taking his own life. I think it's over in St. Anne, somewhere there. So the stress, the trauma associated with life in general, but now the impact of this monster called Melissa on people's minds, their mental health, it's taking a toll. There are persons who have worked their life and their life savings, built their homes, and get their lives set in a certain way, and they are now at retirement and have lost everything. How will those persons cope? There will have to be a deliberate and decisive companion move. So the build back is more than building homes, building bridges and infrastructure. It's also about building resilience in people's minds. It is helping persons with their coping skills, helping people to talk, helping people to be a part of small groups, be a part of community. So clearly you have to also re-energize community activities. Community life has to come back where that is the first outlet where people in an informal way can let off some steam.
Yeah.
You know, sports programs have to be supported. The strengthening of citizens groups and farmers groups and all of those groups where people can call for help, gets it, or people can notice that a fellow colleague is acting a little strange and could use some help. So that social reengineering is critical to the build back that we're talking about.
JPS said that they are at about 80-something%
Yes.
restoration capacity.
Yes.
A lot of what Water Commission and the telecoms, primarily Digicel and Flow,
Yes.
do is dependent on JPS
Yes.
restoring back power. Most of the essential services, such as light, power, telecoms, they are at over 80% restoration,
Yes.
which is good. But also, I think one of the things that also causes many persons living in those communities to worry, right? And it affects their mental health is the constant and consistent supply of aid into those communities. Because if you can't eat, you can't function, right? And that is a challenge. I want to put this to you though. I mean, how can we structure external aid, to avoid creating long-term dependencies,
Yeah.
and instead build, local capacity
Yes.
at the community level. I
Yeah.
mean, how can we go about doing that?
It's a good question. It's a very good question. And I want to start with what I observe the government is doing. The government is operationalizing community shops, right? They are making capital stock available for persons who have lost their small business to get going again.
Right.
That's one way of bringing services right where it's needed to the community shops. To not support long-term dependency is important. And that's why you have to look at stimulating the economy, helping farmers to get back to farming.
Right.
A lot of tourism workers are out of work for months and for
yes.
years, another year or so for some. Well, what are the alternatives? What are the opportunities? Short-term, medium, long-term opportunities. Sandals is sending its team members
Right.
to other parts of the world.
Right.
But what's interesting in my with respect to say the Sandals response. Now you notice that's a local entity looking out for the well-being of locals. It has to be much more of that in the short term, because issuance of care packages obviously is not the solution to the problem. It's just the immediate, it's a relief. But commerce, stimulating economic activity, getting our people back to work, not promising stuff and not delivering. Farmers, by now, most lands would be close to being able to be put back in production by now. There has to be a more efficient way to roll out tractors for plowing and support for the restoration of more climate smart agricultural production inputs.
Yeah.
You have to look at those things because that feeds into the a person's self-esteem. They're able to provide for themselves and their family. I don't think most of us want to be dependent, relying on a care package whenever that comes. much longer further into the future. So stimulating the local economy, getting the small businesses up and running, supported, speedier insurance claims.
Yeah.
Catherine Hall, when I visited Catherine Hall last week, Tuesday, I looked at the number of cars, just everywhere there are cars, and they were not functioning. They were flooded out. All of them were just sitting there. Now, well, if it was that of a junta operator, tourism operator, if it was a taxi man, if it was a person into haulage,
Right.
they're out of business because their machines are out.
Right.
So speedier insurance claims would help.
Yeah.
And you know, they just adopt a more efficient way to deliver services and to stimulate activities back is certainly, I would recommend as the most certain way to break any dependency.
Yeah. I see where the multilateral lending agencies, IMF, World Bank,
Yes.
IDB, and all of those, I mean, they have basically made available, I think it was 6.7 billion US dollars.
Yes.
I think they said that we the recovery budget for Jamaica is 8.8 billion US dollars,
Yes.
right? And I believe that whilst they are not saying that, you know, we have to borrow this money, what they are doing is saying that, you know, this amount of money is available,
Yes.
right? And therefore you have
Access.
you have access to this, but it is a loan in most cases. I think one or two of them, I think they are in the form of grants. We will take that, but there are investors, international investors, who are seeking opportunity. But you know, we have to pay back this money if we should
Yes.
take up these loans, and you have to ensure that the groundwork is laid, so
Right.
as you speak to how to stimulate the economy so that we can pay back this loan.
Yes.
If we should take up this loan.
Yes.
How do you see the you know, large, medium-sized enterprises and even the small ones now taking up some of these loans? I see where even the DBJ,
Yes.
Development Bank of Jamaica, I think
Right.
they have made available
Yes.
10 million
Yes.
Or 10 billion.
Yes. Yes. That's where I actually wanted to start.
Yeah,
Through the DBJ,
yeah,
registered businesses
right.
can access funds. I think it's from as low as 5 million or whatever it is,
Right, right.
but significant sums. The JMEA, I think it is, just announced this week that they're making grant funds
Grant
available
funds,
to their members, right? So there are opportunities for persons to access, for entities to access these funds. Another companion drive we need to make during this time as a part of the build back is a push to have entities, businesses registered formally
Right.
into the system, into the national business registry.
Right. And into the formal economy.
And into the formal economy because of the benefits to be accrued to those enterprises, but also to the economy. Because many of the businesses that are destroyed now won't be able to access
Right, because
capital.
they're informal. And
Very
I
informal.
must say this too, there is sometimes this stigma when we mention informal.
Yes.
There are many persons who operate informally
Yes.
by choice.
Yes.
They will tell you that, listen, me, when I want my money, I don't want no bank tell me that I need, because my ID expired, I can access my money, right? They can't bother with sometimes just the whole bureaucracy in terms of how banks operate.
Yes.
But these are people who generate income in a fair and honest way,
Yes.
right? But they just prefer to operate
Yes.
this particular, which we classify informally. How do you get somebody who operates like that
Yes.
to come over
Yes.
on the formal side?
Yeah, and that person, the technocrats in not just government, because there are NGOs that are into providing advice and consultancy, would need to get the ear of those persons to help them to understand
As
that they're
difficult as it
actually, they're actually limiting their business growth and impact. They may say, but no, I'm comfortable with where my business is, but a good advisor can point out that and one thing that dawned on me recently that more quote unquote informal operators need to look at is that when your business is not registered as an entity independent of you, when you owe money, you are responsible. You, not the business.
Right.
Now, that can take, you're talking about stress management, talking about mental health.
Yes. True.
So that's one way to be able to live at ease and at peace because the business is standing on its own, and the more aligned it is to formality, the more benefit it will bring, not just to you, but to your workers. When it is formally registered, you now can pay NHT benefits for your workers to obtain a house in the near future. They are working with an informal outfit for 10, 15 years. What's the benefit to them? A salary. That's the only benefit when there are multiple other benefits that you don't have to pay for. But because the entity is registered, that qualifies your staff members, your team members, and so forth. So that's going to be an opportunity, and I would probably say a low-hanging fruit in this ecosystem that needs to be all streamlined as we rebuild.
Right. As you mentioned, NHD, because of the informal setup in out by the west. As you know, there's not a lot of housing schemes. That side of the island, right? So even the take-up that NHD is offering is pretty low based on what I've heard from NHD officials. Then again, that's another challenge to get somebody to say, listen, we can offer you a more resilient home if you come through NHD. I haven't heard NHD though mentioning about an express lane for these persons, because I know typically you have to be a contributor for 2 years before you qualify for an NHD loan. And with many of these persons, is it that they will have to now wait 2 years before they qualify for that loan, if they should be so convinced that, okay, I think I would need a housing loan?
I too haven't heard of an express lane for new entrants, because the new ones would be possibly the ones without land tenure. But there is an express lane for existing persons who suffer damage, including a grant in one instance, and then there is a loan for repairs and upgrading on the other hand. So when you look ahead at the opportunities for a proper build back, certainly for me, a social engineer, it's exciting. Because what excites me is the hard work of what needs to put in. It has to be front loaded. And I am saying the government could fast track the process by developing a program of support for NGOs, CBOs, and CSOs and provide them with the terms of reference for a national re-engagement program. Simply talk to people about the emerging Jamaica, the new Jamaica,
right.
all of that. Listen, you don't need government people to do that, because when you take them out of their offices to do that, it means that it is a possibility that the services that they would normally provide is going to be delayed because they're out in the field, just like what happened in the immediate aftermath of the storm. Many personnel, government personnel who have functions in offices to provide services to people were out in the fields in Western Jamaica, leaving a vacancy, leaving the lack of support and services. We can't continue to do that. At one instance, there was a water crisis in my community that we had spoken about. But guess what had happened? The water trucks were deployed to Western Jamaica.
Right.
And there was a crisis right here in St. Catherine that there were no trucks to attend to. We're talking about trucks owned by the commission in this local
has been redeployed
to that disaster zone. But we have to be more smart. We have to be smarter than that. We've got to obviously respond to a disaster with all the resources we have, but recognize that the country has needs scattered all over the place that needs attention to.
We are now into the last 15 minutes of the show. And there is a particular area that I think I haven't heard anybody touch on, and I want to touch on it. Fortunately for the rest of the island, we were spared, right? A few damages here and there.
Yes.
But let's use a community such as Old Harbour.
Yes.
How do we, as a community, as a municipality, and those at the upper echelons of the political directorate, how do we now start the conversation and to institute action to transform the vulnerable communities in Old Harbour and elsewhere that's similar? Because just imagine if this storm had walked, which its original part at one point was to walk between the border of St. Catherine and Clarendon. It would have been total devastation in Old Harbour Bay. It would have been total devastation in even some of these communities in Old Harbour, like Africa and up by land and some parts of Spring Village and Bushy Park and those areas. And other similar communities in Spanish Town and so on. I mean, we need to have a conversation and start to institute plans for these communities too, because the next major storm could very well walk through this era next time.
And we're vulnerable.
Extremely vulnerable. Can you imagine if this hurricane had walked over downtown Kingston?
It's hard to imagine. It's hard to imagine the devastation. We've got to learn from this, what has happened, and allow it to wake us up to the kind of proactivity. You see, larger businesses, although every business should actually have one of them, which is business. Well, the larger businesses have business continuity plans. What are the community continuity plans that exist for our vulnerable communities and our country in general? None. The time has come for those plans to be developed and for those plans to be shared and implemented.
Because you're talking about relocating an entire community. I mean, I went down by Old Harbour Bay, area known as Bodo. And people are basically literally living in the sea.
That's true.
I mean, you have to now start think of relocating those people.
Absolutely.
Right? And the same can be said for all other informal communities along the coastlines and also in the interlands of the parish or the country.
You see, another component of the disaster that hasn't received much widespread, shares.
Yeah.
has been the effect of the rains prior to the storm and the floods during and after the storm that those flood waters have had on the agricultural community in this part of the country. So on the plains of St. Catherine, Bushy Park area, parts of Spring Village, and parts even of Colbeck, where farms were, not only did the ferocious winds pass through,
Right.
but they were flooded too, right? And their livelihoods, whilst those persons' homes and roofs were intact, their livelihoods were gone. So similar to the work with the Old Harbour CDC and the Middle Quarter CDC, work has begun through the Spring Village Foundation and the farmers groups in Spring Village and Bushy Park with a diaspora group, Jalaweo, out of Philadelphia. These Jamaicans, we've in contact, and we've come up with a farmer resuscitation, restoration program where seeds, fertilizers, and seedlings have been provided to numerous farmers in the area to jumpstart their agricultural production and, importantly, their livelihoods. But that will feed into a national solution.
Right.
Because when we speak to the food belt and food basket of St. Elizabeth, Trelawney, and parts of Manchester and Westmoreland that has been demolished, those are going to take some time to get back online. So where arable land, where productive capacity exists, we have to quickly provide the inputs for those producers to get going as a part of recognizing that outside of where the eye passed, the hurricane passed, there were actual impacts to other people that would, when help reaches those folks, then there's a national benefit.
Yeah.
You would see the national benefit in the reduction in the marketplace for vegetables, fruits, and other products. Right? So it is how we look nationally at the opportunities, certainly the challenges that exist and the opportunities that will spring from them going forward.
This issue is so broad, because I mean we haven't even delved deep into the impact as it relates to agriculture, as it relates to the education as well, because from an educational standpoint, I am also foreseeing those children
learning loss.
Yeah, the learning loss will be significant. It's almost similar to COVID.
Yes.
Where and to me the impact is even greater than COVID, because at least during COVID persons had access to the internet,
right,
electricity and water, and they had a roof over their head.
Right.
You're talking about in this case, there's no food, or limited food, limited water, or unstable supply of water as well. Roads inaccessible. I mean, we went to, I'm a part of the Chamber of Commerce like yourself as well. We went to New Works in Westmoreland. And when we spoke to the shelter manager there, who is a retired principal of the New Works Primary School, and she said that there's a tent that UNICEF erected to facilitate grade 6 students who are preparing for PEP. The school population is about 170 students. The basic school from across the road is totally gone, and you still have the school being used as a shelter. Right? school's supposed to reopen back in January, they said. But the shelteries do not have anywhere to go. How do you solve this problem? You can't reopen school like you said with the children and the adults using the canteen, using the same bathroom. That just can't happen. Right? I know UNICEF have been doing some work on the ground from an educational standpoint. But it is so great.
Yes.
And how our government, get the human resources, especially to go into these communities, and also not to politicize the recovery effort as well, because that is also very, very, very key, crucial as well. But I want to touch on something quickly, where I see where the Prime Minister has, if you want to call it lash out or hit back to critics. And I find that to be him stooping too low as a leader. I was quite shocked when he mentioned about, me not afraid of nobody and things like that. I was like, leave that to other people. You don't need to get involved in that. The criticism against them, to me, people were looking forward to see that. You see that political machinery that both parties have when it comes on to election, where they're able to get into every nook and cranny of the communities and pull up people to come and vote or go and get them enumerate. I think that was lacking, because I think they could have now activated that same machinery. Both parties, by the way. Because I think, for example, the opposition spent too many time arguing and pointing fingers when they could have also activated their political machinery too as well. Because it wasn't the entire country that was severely damaged. So they could have moved their human resource within their parties and get people on the ground to provide aid and whatever necessary support. And I think that is where I think they were heavily criticized, because people were seeing the celebrities, the entertainers and those persons getting into the communities providing aid and not seeing much of the political representatives on the ground like what we are accustomed to when it comes down to election time. What say you on that?
Yeah, well, that too was a missed opportunity to show up and to engage and to serve. And the response was late where that was concerned. But I think we're too much of a political animal, and hence we miss the real opportunities to be human and to reach each other and be there for each other. We come out with guns blaring during the political, election time. But the resources, the human resources that we have access to, we can deploy them for many different things. And we probably would have missed that opportunity. The good thing about it, and maybe it's not too late, because the real long haul is ahead of us. And once we get over bickering, once we are able to see Jamaica, to see Jamaicans at the core, at what it is that needs to be done, I believe we'll get it right. We'll get it right. Sometimes we put ourselves on the stage, in the center, in the core of what's happening. That's not where leaders and politicians are supposed to be. They're supposed to be active, coordinating, supporting, enabling the activities, just as they would other times. So the opportunity still exists, however, for them to get it right, leverage those structure, those machinery that they have had and have utilized so well for electoral purposes.
Well, Mr. Finnikin, guess what? We are out of time now, and I must say, we have many more to discuss. The topic is broad, and we will continue to discuss the recovery efforts
Definitely.
But there are so many more topics that we intend to discuss
Yes.
going forward. And just to say to those online that we will definitely be back next week. By that time, you would have celebrated Christmas. But we want to wish yourself and your family, Brother Finnikin, a Merry Christmas, and to you online, a Merry Christmas to you too as well. And we look forward to having many more discussions like this and putting forward constructive solutions. Thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me, and I say the same to you and yours. Do have a wonderful Christmas. The same for our viewers. Do enjoy Christmas, and remember, in fact, Christmas is happening. Keep your focus on the Christ child. Make him the center, and in fact, he's the reason for the season, and Christmas will really, truly happen.
All right. So there you have it, folks. Thank you, and see you next time.
Thank you.